In Great Expectations, Charles Dickens presents Philip Pirrip, better known as Pip, as one of the most memorable protagonists in Victorian literature. His story is both deeply personal and broadly symbolic, capturing a journey of self-discovery, social aspiration, moral awakening, and emotional maturity. As the narrator and central character, Pip is not only the lens through which the novel unfolds but also its emotional and thematic core. His experiences illuminate key issues including class, ambition, guilt, love, and identity in a changing Victorian society. Role in the narrative. Pip is both the protagonist and narrator of Great Expectations, recounting his life story from childhood to adulthood. The novel is structured as a Bildungsroman or coming-of-age story, in which Pip undergoes profound personal transformation. He begins as a poor orphan raised by his harsh sister and kind brother-in-law, Joe Gargery, in the marshes of Kent. Early in the novel, Pip's encounter with the escaped convict Magwitch and his visits to Miss Havisham and Estella mark the beginning of his internal conflict between his affection for his humble origins and his desire for gentility and social prestige. When Pip learns that he has come into a mysterious fortune, his great expectations, he moves to London to become a gentleman, believing this wealth comes from Miss Havisham and is part of a plan for him to marry Estella. This belief shapes his ambition and leads to a gradual alienation from those who genuinely care for him, especially Joe. The turning point of the narrative occurs when Pip discovers that his benefactor is not Miss Havisham but Abel Magwitch, the convict he once helped as a child. This revelation forces Pip to reassess his values and the sources of true worth and loyalty. He comes to understand that gentility is not determined by wealth or social status, but by character and kindness. By the novel's end, Pip matures into a humbler, more empathetic man, capable of forgiveness and self-reflection. Symbolic significance. Pip represents several important symbolic ideas in the novel. Chief among them is the theme of self-delusion versus self-knowledge. Throughout much of the story, Pip constructs a fantasy about his life, believing he is destined for greatness, that wealth will bring him happiness, and that Estella is meant to be his. These illusions are gradually dismantled, and Pip must face harsh truths about himself and the world. He is also a symbol of social aspiration and the myth of self-improvement. In Victorian society, which was increasingly obsessed with class mobility and personal success, Pip embodies the tension between social ambition and moral responsibility. His journey reveals the dangers of valuing appearance over substance, status over integrity. Dickens uses Pip to critique the idea that becoming a gentleman, in the social sense, necessarily implies becoming a better person. Moreover, Pip symbolizes the human conscience. Much of the novel's emotional depth comes from Pip's feelings of guilt, gratitude, and inner conflict. He is haunted by his treatment of Joe and Biddy, by his shame at his origins, and by his misplaced admiration for the upper class. This constant moral struggle makes Pip deeply relatable and positions him as a symbol of ethical growth and emotional honesty. Broader implications. Pip's character reflects several of the central themes of Great Expectations, allowing Dickens to explore broader questions about identity, class, and morality. One of the novel's central themes is the critique of social class distinctions. Pip's initial belief that being a gentleman means having money, fine clothes, and refined manners is gradually deconstructed. Through characters like Joe, a morally upright poor blacksmith, and Drummle, a wealthy gentleman who is cruel and abusive, Dickens demonstrates that true gentility is defined by kindness, honesty, and integrity rather than birth or wealth. Pip's eventual recognition of this truth marks the climax of his moral development. Pip's transformation is heavily shaped by the people around him. Miss Havisham, Estella, Magwitch, Joe, and Herbert. Each character influences his perceptions, values, and decisions. This reflects the novel's concern with how upbringing and environment mold character. Pip's internal conflict between his love for Joe and his desire to rise in society mirrors the Victorian tension between rural simplicity and urban sophistication. Guilt is a recurring emotion for Pip. From helping a convict as a frightened boy to neglecting Joe and feeling unworthy of Magwitch's sacrifice, Pip is constantly aware of his moral failings. However, Great Expectations is also a novel about redemption. Pip atones for his mistakes by caring for Magwitch in his final days and reconciling with Joe and Biddy. His journey affirms Dickens's belief in the possibility of personal growth and the redemptive power of love and humility. Pip's unrequited love for Estella is another defining element of his character. His obsession blinds him to Estella's emotional unavailability and Biddy's genuine care. This love is symbolic of illusion, the romantic ideal that leads Pip away from reality. Only after losing Estella and enduring personal hardship does Pip come to a more mature understanding of love, one based on respect and shared experience rather than idealization. Pip's development throughout the novel is profound. Initially, he is insecure and self-conscious, ashamed of his background and desperate for approval from society and Estella. As he gains wealth and social standing, his sense of superiority grows, but so does his inner discomfort and alienation. His eventual disillusionment, primarily upon learning that his benefactor is a criminal, forces him to re-evaluate what truly matters. By the end of the novel, Pip is no longer driven by pride or ambition. He cares for Magwitch not because he must, but because he feels genuine gratitude. He returns to Joe and Biddy in humility, recognizing their unconditional love. This change reflects Dickens's vision of moral maturity, one that involves compassion, humility, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Conclusion. Pip stands at the heart of Great Expectations, embodying the novel's exploration of identity, ambition, morality, and emotional growth. As both narrator and protagonist, he offers readers a deeply personal and honest account of human weakness and the potential for redemption. Through Pip's eyes, Dickens critiques the social values of Victorian England, demonstrating that true greatness lies not in wealth or status but in integrity, empathy, and self-awareness. Ultimately, Pip's journey from the innocence of the marshes to the complexities of London society, and finally to the clarity of self-awareness, transforms him into not only a better man but also a timeless literary figure, flawed, earnest, and deeply human.